Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 12, 2012 committee meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We're going to have a very interesting item coming up. Actually follows on what the governor started talking to us about, and that is the accountability issues that this system is facing. Item number 3 on the agenda will begin a focused look at student retention strategies that are in place at our state universities. Student retention, of course, is a critical issue, and our universities are spending considerable resources to provide programs and services that help students to progress through and complete a degree program efficiently. I know that most of the members of the board share my interest in efforts to improve graduation rates at all of our universities. So today we will learn about academic tracking systems that work to keep students on track in their pursuit of a degree through a clearly defined path of required courses and help students to complete the requirements for a degree and a course to graduate. We've got 3 university administrators who have joined us to help us learn about this important retention strategy, academic tracking system. First, I'd like to invite Dr. Karen Laughlin, Dean of Undergraduate Studies at Florida State University, to discuss FSU's academic mapping system. Dean?
Thank you so much. Governors and university presidents, it's a pleasure and an honor to have this opportunity to talk with you about some of the things that we've been doing at Florida State University. Let's see, you'll get this. Whoop, that's not me. There we go. What I thought I would try to do today, I discussed this with John Rogers, is to put our tracking system, which we actually call mapping at Florida State, in context of our overall retention strategies. I'll try to go through this very quickly. There's a lot of detail on the slides in your packet, but I will try to hit some of the high points because, in our view, mapping is a very key element of a retention strategy, but for us it has been one piece in an overall pretty long-term concerted effort to improve student retention, therefore college completion by our students as well. So as you can see, we are very pleased that we can now count ourselves in the top third of public research universities in terms of both retention and graduation, with roughly a 74% graduation rate, 6-year graduation rate, and a 92% retention rate. And I have to say right off the bat that I want to give kudos to the University of Florida, because when we implemented our mapping system, we had long conversations with folks who were very generous at Florida and who really helped us get started. But at the same time, I think you will perhaps hear from all 3 of us that there is not a simple plug-in mapping system, that it's a complex system that needs to be tailored to the unique curriculum and structure of each university. So here's a little bit of how it works at Florida State. Maybe. There we go. So first of all, as what the chairman mentioned, every major now has a term-by-term academic map that is accessed through this academic program guide, where students can also find the academic learning compacts for each major and other information about each department and program on the campus. We introduced mapping in 2004. This is what our particular maps look like. They include a sample schedule that you see on the left-hand column that is fairly broad, but still points to students a good way to establish their curriculum semester by semester. And perhaps the key feature on the right-hand side are the milestones which students must meet each semester in order to be considered to be making good progress toward their degrees. All of our departments developed and tested their maps, and they continue to adjust them as needed. And what we find is that these are very important in terms of helping students find the major that works for them, and it also helps us as an institution manage student course demand, because we know what course, if we know how many students are enrolled in a given major, we then know what milestones they need to meet at a particular time, and we can then be ensuring that we provide enough seats in those classes so that no student is unable to meet a required milestone at the appropriate time. The maps also include, I'm sorry, it's not a very elegant slide, that's the bottom half of the map, but they also include career and employment information, which we update and change, and we certainly develop this in partnership with our Career Center. What I would say from our perspective, though, is that maps are themselves, where am I pointing this up here probably? Maps are not enough. That effective mapping and effective degree and retention program, degree completion and retention programs really require a very robust advising system as well as other academic support systems, because students don't always meet those milestones. Students need help finding an appropriate major, and working with transfer students and special populations. There are many issues. For us, an effective relationship with an advisor is really at the heart of an effective and successful retention and completion program. To make effective choices, students need accurate information, and they need it at the appropriate time, and that's what an advisor can often provide to them. In our experience, one of the major causes of student attrition is facing some kind of a life crisis, even if it's just that you didn't meet your milestones, and not getting adequate support. And so that support structure for us is really key. So we have at Florida State now a quite robust advising program called Advising First, as well as, these are not the only advisors, but we have a team of about 40 trained professional advisors, as well as some academic success coaches who are placed across campus. And they are the first line of interaction for most students in mapping situations. I won't go into the details here unless you want to ask questions, but there are several points at which a run is done by the computer to show us where students might be falling off their maps or going off course, is the metaphor we like to use. And then they will be called in to speak with an advisor to take appropriate action. And I guess the one thing I would like to say is that so often when we call students in because they've received a hold on their registration or a notification through our email system about a mapping situation, they say, "Thank you for noticing. We're a big university. We're really grateful somebody has picked up on the fact that things aren't going quite right for me right now, and I want to talk to you and get some support about how to get back on course and move forward." Or perhaps a student who thought they changed their major, but they didn't change their major, so they're off course, but they really don't think they're off course because they're already in a different major. So it's those conversations that are really important to have. Another thing I wanted to mention just very briefly is our exploratory advising program. We're very, very proud of this program. It won the Outstanding Academic Advising Program Award from the National Academic Advising Association, this past year. And we feel that this is a key also to the effectiveness of our mapping. Like many schools who have some kind of a tracking or mapping system, we require all students to declare a major when they first come to the university, but we offer them the option to declare exploratory if they really are not sure. And what we find is that this keeps students from the zigzag approach, where they try major A, they try major B, they try major C. By that time, they've accumulated a lot of hours, and they often still aren't sure what they want to do. So what we did was reinvent the old undecided major, making it much more intentional to say to students, okay, if you're not sure what you want to major in, that's fine. We're here to help you, but we are going to take you through a set of very well-defined action steps that you must follow with mandatory advising, mandatory activities, and these will help you get to the place where ultimately you can, in our parlance, declare your major with confidence. This program is based on the work of a researcher named Virginia Gordon, who argues that about 70% of college students really need some help with major selection when they first come to college. And so we used her model to try to help students make sound, informed decisions through this phase of looking at themselves. Who am I? What do I value? What's important to me? What kind of majors are out there that might fit with my own sense of myself? And then what sort of career options are there for me if this is the major that I wish to take? And what we find is that after 3 semesters, about more than 92% of students do declare a major at that time. The other 8% we're still working with, trying to help them get there. But this is, I think, a very high success rate, and it really does limit the amount of major changing that we see as students go on through their systems or their programs. Another element of mapping that perhaps others will address too is that, of course, for students who transfer with the AA or even without the AA, it's also very important that we assess the readiness of those students to come into our programs and to actually be successful in the major that they've chosen. Are they prepared? You can't have a student who wants to be an engineer transferring as a junior who's never taken math at any kind of a level that is commensurate with the requirements of an engineering degree. So our mapping coordinators review the credentials of every single transfer applicant. We also do a lot of outreach to our community colleges, especially our main feeder college, Tallahassee Community College, and then we set the appropriate map term, but we also give a lot of guidance to those students before they set foot on our campus so that when they get to Florida State University, they are ready to go. We've certainly done, although the graduation rate data is still coming in because we really only did full-blown mapping by '05, so we're just now beginning to see a real 6-year impact on graduation rates. But this was a study that was done just looking at students who were close to the point at which they could graduate and yet hadn't yet declared the intention to graduate. So this is what we mean by excess hours on this slide. It's not quite the latest legislative definition, but you can see that over time the number of students having a lot of excess hours accumulated has gone down dramatically, and we do think, and the graduation rate has gone up. We do think mapping is playing a role here. Just very quickly, I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but what I want to illustrate here is that point I made at the beginning, that mapping, which you see there, well, 2002, I think actually that little box should be over a couple of bars. But mapping is really part of this larger systematic effort that has been in place at Florida State University for the last 12 years at least, and probably even a little bit longer than that. So if you unpacked all of our acronyms, which I won't take time to do right now, but you can see many, many different programs that have been put into place as we began to look at not only globally, how does mapping help every student who enrolls at the university, but then how can we look systematically at subgroups of students? First-generation low-income students, what can we do to help that group? High-achieving students who are still leaving the university, how can we get them better engaged? How can we provide academic support for those students who struggle in their first semester? So these various programs that we've put into place and that are, you will see, having an impact also on graduation rates already, are part of the structure that to me kind of embraces the mapping program at Florida State. And makes it as robust and as powerful as it has been for us in terms of improving both retention and graduation. So on these next slides, again, here are some quick summaries of some key steps that we've taken. We have got a campus-wide group that this was an idea, certainly UF helped us develop, of an enrollment management group that we have continued to refine, where we set a program of action steps we could take. We gave people targets. We were certainly very focused on accountability. We reach out to students in a variety of ways. Our advisors now log over 1 million contacts in a given year, thanks to a lot of outreach activities, email blasts, all kinds of things where we try to contact students. We set up advising in places where the students were, for example, offering late night and weekend advising at our library. We looked at things like attendance policies, because we noticed that when students were in courses where students were not performing well, often there wasn't a strong attendance policy, and if we could convince faculty to encourage attendance by really taking attendance and making it count for something, that made a big difference. And a number of other programs like freshman interest groups and learning communities, as well as just putting forward the accomplishments of successful students so that they could be role models for others. We've looked at FSU, as you know, is a relatively traditional residential campus. We see that this makes a huge difference for us, that students who live on campus tend to do much better in terms of both first-year retention and overall graduation. They tend to be happier, they tend to be better connected to the university. So this is very important to us. And then this slide also lists some of the other strategies that we've put into place that, again, I can elaborate on if you wish, but I'm mindful of your time and of two others waiting to present to you, so at least you have this in your packet of some other suggestions of things that we have done. And finally, I thought this last couple slides might be, I don't know whether you can even read them, but we decided to try a little pilot study on the impact of tutoring. And so we looked at students who did not do well on the first test in an introductory, college algebra class. And we mandated tutoring for them. And of those students who actually went to at least half of the tutoring sessions they were told to go to, virtually all of them ended up doing well in the class. The half that didn't ended up doing poorly in the class. So it's a very small pilot, but we want to do more things like this to really see what impact our investment in tutoring is having on students, especially who are struggling. And then the last slide shows you some data for the coaching program that we've put into place, where we've isolated, again, select populations that are at risk for not being retained at the rate we would like to see. Students coming from out of state, where obviously we are looking for the tuition dollars that they bring, but also for some diversity in our population, but also low-income students who tend to struggle, first-generation students who tend to struggle but may not be in our care program, which takes a small group of first-generation students, and other populations. And what we found is that they are doing much better than the historical averages for those populations with an intensive program of support through a bi-weekly meeting with somebody who is helping coach them through their first year or their second year of college. So again, in summary, I would just say, for us, mapping has been very important. It's made a big difference. I think we expect to continue to see benefits from it, but I think that it needs to be seen as part of a larger strategy where we really are reaching out to our students in many different ways and trying to provide the support that will help each student be successful and make the most out of their time at the university. So, thank you very much.
Any questions of the Dean?
Norm, thank you very much. I'm not even on this committee, but I like to talk.
On our committee, everybody's on the committee.
I had this feeling you were a committee of the whole anyway, so.
Is there, if you looked at the top 50 public universities, what's the average number of advisors that they would have per student? Would they?
Right.
And how do you all fit in that average? And is the top 10 significant, even higher?
Yeah. Yes, I think the answer to your second question is yes. The recommended advisor-student ratio from the National Academic Advising Association, NACADA, is about 400 students to 1, which sounds like a lot, but you imagine that many students are self-directed and they don't need to see the advisor advisor all the time. We are at about 520 to 1, so we're still higher than we'd like to be, but we do think that the addition of advisors has made an enormous difference, and although I'm a faculty member myself, I think the turn to professional advisors at a large state university was very important, because the changes in policy and legislation, the rules are just, so detailed that it's hard for faculty members to keep up. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's what we'd love to be at 400 to 1. That's a little bit more than we've been able to manage with our resources at this point.
Any other questions?
Can you just tell us
Lori?
what the cost is to this kind of a program? How much did it cost last year for all of these?
I don't know whether I can give you a bottom line for that right off the top of my head. I'm just looking at President Barron thinking, well, how can I do it, some quick numbers? It's very hard for me to do that. You've got a cadre of 40 advisors right now. They're making on an average about $30,000. I wish we paid them better than we do. So that's maybe one start to a calculation there. I can't give you a number off the top of my head. I'm really sorry. It's an investment. It's a definite investment by the university. I'm sorry?
You could do the number.
Oh, sure. I mean, I can come up with a number, so we can certainly...
We'll bring back a number.
Sure.
Thank you, Maury.
Dean, I'm going to ask you this question. So you're number 43rd, 44th among the public universities.
42.
42.
My apology. God.
Okay.
Um,
Who's counting?
yeah,
Right.
So let me ask you a question. What do you, as the dean, thinks, as academia, takes to bring FSU in the top 25? Then I'll ask the president about the cost.
Well, of course, the president's sitting right here, so the first thing I would say is that a bigger budget would help us a great deal. Like many universities, we have struggled with the loss of faculty with the recent budget cuts, and I do think that that is a key factor.
Are you talking about the faculty students? Is that, if you bring down your faculty students down, is that the only issue you have, that you're not top 25?
Oh, no. I think that,
What are the
I think there's a broader issue here. I think there are issues, again, this is probably a better question to direct to the president, but if you want to know how it looks from the Dean of Undergraduate
Right.
Studies perspective, I think that is one big factor. It's hard, as you have to teach larger classes from the standpoint of how we support the students. But beyond that, I think that the marriage of the research that our faculty do at a major research university and the engagement of our undergraduates in that research, which we are continuing to increase and develop, is also a key factor, because that helps us graduate better informed, better prepared, graduates with higher skills, and it also enhances the research reputation of the university, and we know that a good portion of that ranking is reputational, as well as, of course, all the other myriad factors that are involved.
What do you mean by reputational? I mean, you either have it or you don't.
Yes, but if you think about over the years, the way in which you think about University X, you might say, how much has my opinion about University X changed, and how do I know that that university has changed? So I think that reputations do change much more slowly than the actual outputs of the university might demonstrate. And that is something that is hard to control for. I should defer to President Barron before I really get myself in trouble here.
My view is that there's probably an elite, and commonly people say this way, an elite 30 publics. And we're 12 spots off, okay? I don't like to overpromise or say I'm going to be a member of this or something else, but I do think we should be able to work to get all of our metrics going in the right direction. Our retention rates have been improving significantly over the last decades. Our graduation rates are improving significantly, and what we've done for retention is just barely appearing in the growth of the improvement in our graduation rate. Every single category in the last year ranking, every single category that is measured and ranked, whether it was alumni giving or whether it was freshman retention rate, you name it, every single one improved. The only quantitative factor that did not improve was faculty resources. And faculty resources is basically two elements. It's your student-faculty ratio, and it's the salaries at which you pay your faculty. And of course, you know that I'm a faculty that is subject to being rated because of the salaries that we offer. We are working overtime to find as much savings as we can in the university, and sadly for all my other VPs, the last two budget cuts we worked to take out of every single VP's pocket except for academic affairs, because we can't afford to lose any more faculty. We were down 200, and almost all of those junior faculty, so we were going to pay the price for many years to come because we weren't hiring there. So my hope is that as we begin to find the efficiencies and reinvest, hopefully the state also sees a reason to give us a little bit of GR and let us hold our tuition down, that we'll try to improve in that last category. The only other categories that are remaining are the categories in terms of assessment by your peers and assessment by high school counselors. And obviously I'm taking one particular ranking system, and there's more than one. Now, the interesting thing about high school counselors is that only about 10% of them are responding. So there's a very small base at which to make up your mind. And a huge number of those are very ranking conscious themselves, because that's where they want to send their own students. And so that number is kind of a flaky one and very difficult to budge. And then you take a peer ranking, and so all the presidents are doing the ranking. And so in there, it's kind of an interesting bias because it's what they know about the institutions and maybe even the institution that they came from. So when we see all reputational rankings, which I think are about 20% of the total, you see it's very hard to move up and down. So the place where you have the leeway in improving your ranking, if you're focused on that, that's not the only thing we should be focused on. But if that is what you're focused on, are all these quantitative measures in terms of your selectivity, alumni giving rate, all of the things that we've been talking about. And like I say, we're an institution for 2 years in a row. I think every single category is improved except for the one that we don't have any control over. And that's the resources.
So let's talk about the student-faculty
Yeah.
ratio.
Oh.
You're at 20, how many student-faculty you have?
It's
20-something?
It's been in the neighborhood of 24, 25.
Okay.
And typically what you're seeing in institutions that are ranked significantly ahead of us, they're closer to 20 or 22.
Closer to 20.
So you're looking at a numbers game there. I would say one other thing, that in those 12 universities that separate Florida State from being in the elite 30, we outrank them, every single one of them, on some of these measures, and some of them we don't. And so there's no doubt that if we could manage some of these ranking characteristics, such as faculty-student ratios, such as what we pay, and improve on other ones that should be our business that we're not doing well enough, we'd beat those 12 universities.
So if you're top 30, or should you be top 25 to be part of AAU?
I'm happy to be in the top 25, and I'm happy to be higher than that. But I think we should be somewhat realistic that with 6 years of budget cuts, in many ways it's a marvel that we're improving on all of those different metrics, despite the fact that we've lost 25% of our academic budget. And so, it's hard to sit there and say, I want to be top 20. You can say it easily.
Sure.
But the simple fact of the matter is, I think you have to be a realist. My view is moving us in those 12 spots. We moved 4 this year. Now, we moved up 4 places in quality from 46 to 42, from 101 among all universities to 97. Our financial resources dropped from 204 to 212. They only rank 270 universities. So we're delivering top 100, and we're not even in the top 200 in financial resources. So and that's partly a product of all these budget cuts. So it's very hard to sit there and take budget cut after budget cut and say, yeah, I'm gonna go out there and tear up the turf on rankings. I'm amazed that we went up 4 spots while dropping in financial resources 8 places. But I do think, with not an enormous amount of investment, that those universities, I mean, I'm biased. I think I'm already ahead of those universities in terms of quality, but I got to get some of my metrics there.
So I want to just go down to student faculty, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to learn, so, Mr. President. So, from my understanding, it's, when you get a freshman student, it's much cheaper to teach them the first 2 years because you can put them in a 300-student classrooms. And then once you go to the upper, level, you can't put them, so you have 15 student, in a classroom, or 18 students, So if you teach less freshmen, all of a sudden, that will change. The ratio will change. And I understand the reason for that is cheaper, upper class is more expensive, average out. So, and I know the cost. So assuming, let's say that the state comes and gives you money, that immediately for you to get to where you want to get, can you basically say, okay, I'm going to take less freshman student and more transfer students? Wouldn't that changes that student faculty pretty quickly?
Okay, but remember also that a lot of those other metrics are depending on the characteristics of the students we're accepting. And the number one complaint I get from parents is it's too hard to get into Florida State University. You're headed towards 40,000 applications for a freshman class that's under 7,000 students. Now, a lot of the students, I think, are applying to lots of institutions, and I have institutions for which it's very typical that my students will apply to those other institutions, and so I may lose more because of the competitive environment in the state with very low tuition levels than might occur for other institutions. But if we were just to focus on transfer students, for which we work really hard to get them into Florida State because they're not at the level to be accepted in our current applicant pool. So we're really having, with a great partnership with schools like TCC, setting them up to make a transfer. So I do think that you would actually have a negative impact on a lot of other metrics if you just played a game with the number of freshmen admits you have, especially since, literally, the number one complaint I get is that this is too hard. We remove all non-academic classes and recalculate the grade point, and the average is right at about 4.0, and 90% of our students are above a 3.5. And so this is a challenging environment, and these are also the students our faculty want. So I think we would actually end up having more complaints, and I would do more poorly on some of these metrics if I decided that I was an institution that was mostly going to take transfer students.
I'm
Lori,
I have just, finish it. I know I'm trying to.
Quite a bit. I want to take it, but.
Yeah, I'll finish up now. Maybe later on we can talk. I'm really trying to understand, and understand the bottom line. What is your mission? Do you want to be a top 25 or not, or top 30? And if you do you pay attention to if a parent say, well, this is too hard to get to FSU? So, because if you get to top 25, I'm sure your grade point average have to go up. You have to be more selective.
There is no doubt that we pay attention to a wide range of metrics, and we push hard to do things that are deliberate to improve on those metrics for which we believe they signal academic quality. There's just we frequently do this. This whole approach that's been quite transformative to have academic maps to inform a student in a 41,000-student university to inform students when they fall off that map and make sure that they're talking to advisors, to have coaches, to have a care program, to work to promote tutoring. All those things is an investment to make sure that key metrics that tell us whether we're saving taxpayer dollars or not, and whether we're making our students successful or not. Forget the rankings, just making our students successful. Those are deliberate strategies that the university is doing so that we can stand up and tell everybody, I don't care what you look like, I don't care what your academic background is, we're going to make sure that you graduate and get a good job. A perfect example is veterans. Veterans are graduating at a lower rate. Our veterans were graduating at a lower rate. We've had a whole set of deliberate programs to make sure that we could look any veteran in the eye and say, regardless of the fact that you're very different, you're going to graduate at that same high rate and you're going to be retained at that same rate. We've already changed it by 5 percentage points. And we're closing in on what our, so we're very deliberate about this.
Thank you.